What is up, my Shadowverse soldiers, and welcome back to another Shadowverse Evolve video. Alright soldiers, so in this video we're going to be going over the Abysscraft reveals for set 16. I don't know a single bit of the cards that are going to be coming out, but let's figure out what cards are coming out and let's cook and concoct. Alrighty, so looking at our first cards, we have Cerberus Hellfire Unleashed. So she's a 4-cost 3/3. When she comes into play, Fanfare, summon a Mimi right paw Hellbound and a Coco left paw Hellbound token. And then if you have Necrocharge 10, so 10 cards in Cemetery, you can give them Storm. You can also activate to engage this card and then bury another follower, and then select enemy follower on the field and deal it 2 damage. Alright, so usually how it's going to work, at least from what Worlds Beyond, was that you did play these Coco and Mimi tokens, and then you can use this activate to engage the card to get rid of them, and then the Coco and Mimi cards did have last words effects. Alright, then looking at our Mimi right paw Hellbound, so it's a 1-cost 2/2 and then has last words. So select enemy follower on the field and deal it 2 damage, and then bury the top card of your deck. Alright, so this being one of the cards that you can give Storm is pretty cool too, and then on top of that you can deal an extra 2 damage to a follower while also putting more Necrocharge to it. Alright, and then looking at Coco left paw Hellbound, so it's also a 1-cost 2/2 and then last words to give your leader +2 defense, and you can bury the top card of your deck. Alright, so if you're playing ahead, then this is the card to go for in terms of removal. So you can deal 2 damage to a follower, get rid of it, and then also healing yourself for 2, and then adding some more Necrocharge to yourself. Alrighty, next we have Aragavi Eternal Hunter. So he's a 5-cost 4/4, you can evolve him for 1, but when he comes into play, you can give your leader -2 defense, and then you can draw a card. Alright, so you gotta love it when we see some more Sanguine support. I really do like Sanguine as an engine. Like, I actually might be investing in it probably the next set, or maybe the next set after it, but I do believe Sanguine does have legs. It's just kind of hard to play around with your life when a lot of decks are really gaining more than you are. Alrighty, we have the Eternal Hunter Evolve. So he turns into a 5/5, but on Evolve you can select up to 3 enemy followers on the field and deal 5 damage divided between them. And if your leader's defense is 10 or less, you can deal 10 damage instead. But on Super Evolve you can give this follower Storm. Alright, so I'm gonna be a little realistic here. I know turn 7 isn't something that Sanguine is looking towards. Like, this is very good to probably like close out the game if your opponent is around like 5 or like maybe 8, something like that. But you know, once we start getting to turn 7, that's when we kind of start getting a little shaky in terms of Sanguine, because we're kind of trying to play low to the ground. Our life is kind of our resource. Of course, we're going to be healing back for the things that we are doing Sanguine for, but we are kind of playing a little bit lower to the ground. So turn 7 is kind of weird for Super Evolve, but if you haven't already closed the game out by like turn 6, and then, you know, like if you're not closing the game out by turn 7, then you're definitely in a very weird position. Alright, next up we have Gold Rush Ghost. So it's a 2-cost 2/2 and it has Storm, and at the start of your opponent's end phase you can bury this card, but when this card comes into play you can choose one. But if this card was summoned from the cemetery, you can choose up to 2 instead. You can either 1, summon Arcane Personal Carrier token and give your leader +1 defense, or you can 2, bury the top 2 cards of your deck. Alright, so this is going to be pretty good for the Departed deck, not only for the fact that you can turn this into a 2/3 with Ward, and then on top of that, if you're able to summon this from the cemetery, which you are for Wasteland, you can bury the top 2 cards of your deck, which would be very helpful. Alrighty, but next up we have Mukan Shadow Crypt Ward. So he's a 3-cost 3/3, you can evolve him for 1. Alrighty, and looking at Shadow Crypt Ward Evolve, so he turns into a 4/4, and whenever a departed follower is put onto your field, you can give your leader +1 defense. But on Evolve, you can select a departed follower that costs 3 less in your cemetery and then summon it. But on Super Evolve, you can select a departed follower that costs 3 less in your cemetery and summon it and give it a sail. Alright, so I'm not gonna lie to you, we're only going to be getting the 1 super evolution point, and I know how Shadowverse does work with you're not gonna always draw the legendary card that's going to need the super evolve, so giving the gold card is going to be pretty good for the super evolve, but it just feels like this, like the super evolve isn't really worth on a lot of these cards. Now, there are some that are very worth, don't get me wrong, but like I think a lot of the gold cards, I mean a good percentage of them, and I might be opinionated in that, but being able to do the exact same thing, well, I guess on Super Evolve you are doing it twice. Technically, you are doing it twice and you're able to heal 2. I was only thinking personally that you only do it once, but doing it twice, being able to summon 2 departed followers that are 3 or less and you get their fanfare effects, and then with the Super Evolve you can give the one that you did summon from the cemetery a sail as well. So hopefully it's a follower with Rush or something like that. Alrighty, next up we have Balto Dusk Bounty Hunter. So he's a 2-cost 2/2, and when you play him Fanfare, choose up to 3. You can either 1, spend 1 extra play point to select enemy follower on the field and destroy it, or 2, spend 1 play point and give this follower +2/+2 in Ward, or 3, spend 1 extra play point to give this follower +1/+1, draw 2 cards and then discard a card. So I think a total of 5 of doing everything that you want to do on this card. So initially you can just choose up to, so you can only choose one of these abilities if you want to, but if you want to do all 3, you can just spend the whole amount of play points doing all of them. So spending a total of 5, I believe, will give you access to turning this card into a 4/4 and then a 5/5. And unfortunately, this card would be pretty good if you were able to give it Storm too, but you know, that would be a little ludicrous. But turning this into a 5/5 with Ward that allows you to draw 2 cards and discard a card, and then selecting an enemy following the field and destroying it is, you know, still pretty nasty in itself too. Alright, but next we have Cerise Blue Rose Maiden. So she's a 2-cost 1/3. She has Bane, but Necrocharge 5. This follower has Storm. And during your turn, when this follower deals damage to an enemy leader, each opponent discards a card. Ooh, I really like this card. So I am interested in getting into hand control for Abyss. I really absolutely love hand control. I know that's a toxic strategy, but come on, Planetary Fracture is a card that is a card that still wins games. So, you know, am I really that evil? But this card is actually pretty interesting. There's lots of tools for like Rulanite to really work. So taking your opponent's hand away while they're also trying to struggle for resources and keeping a board is just really good. All right, so looking at Orthrus Hellhound Blader. So she's a 2-cost 2/2, and you can evolve her for 1. Alright, and looking at the Blader Evolve, so she turns into a 3/3, but on Evolve you can choose one. You can either 1, select enemy following the field and then Necrocharge 10, deal it 5 damage, or you can 2, bury the top 2 cards of your deck. Alright, so I'm not gonna lie, I really do like this silver card, not only for the art because it does look pretty cool, but you're actually able to just, like, mechanically, this is pretty good. So on turns 3, you're able to just bury the top 2 cards of your deck, which you're able to do on a lot of the 2-cost cards, so I'm glad that we have for set 16 a new, like, wave of these cards. And then on top of that, having Necrocharge 10 allows you to deal 5 damage to something, so that's even good too. Alrighty, next we have Yuna Occult Hunter. So she's a 1-cost 2/2, but when she comes into play, you put 2 ghost tokens or 2 force bat tokens into your EX area. Alright, so if you're still running vampires, this is a nice 1-cost card to get. Now, it's not going to be like the other cards where you're going to be putting at least 1, and then when you play a force bat, you can get the other effects. But this is a goblin that does put 2 force bats into the EX area. Alrighty, next up we have Soul Predation. So it's a 2-cost spell, so you can select enemy follower on the field and a follower on your field and destroy them and then draw a card. Alright, so I really do like this card, only for the fact that you're going to be able to just hard remove something no matter what the stats are on 2 play points, and for the fact that Abysscraft is going to have a lot of followers that do have last words, so you're able to trigger those last words while also drawing a card from Soul Predation. Alrighty, next we have Vlad Impaler. So he's a 7-cost 4/4. You can evolve him from 1 and he has Storm, but when it comes into play, you can deal 3 damage to each enemy follower on the field. Alright, so this card isn't too terrible. Now, if you're running on a bit of a budget and you really do want to run vampires, then Alucard is definitely the old news, so Vlad Impaler is pretty good too. Being able to deal 3 damage to each enemy follower on the field is pretty good board wipe potential. And then you have a 4/4 with Storm. Personally, for 7 play points, I wouldn't be opposed to this being a 5/5, but you know, 4/4 with Storm, that probably does evolve into a 5/5 with Storm. Alright, and then looking at Vlad Evolve, so he does turn into a 5/5, and then he has Storm and Drain. Okay, not too bad, being able to deal 3 damage to the entire board and then evolving this and then getting Storm and Drain. We do kind of wish that this had a little bit more heal on it, maybe just for the 7 play points, but there might be a, you know, easier way to cheat this card out. Alrighty, next we have a Real Moonstruck Vampire. So she's a 4-cost 3/3. When she comes into play, you summon 2 force bat tokens. You can activate to engage this card, and you can select a vampire token follower on your field and give it +1/+1, and then rush and drain. So I really do like the design that they are moving forward with set 16 here. So being able to renew these cards that we did have for Shadowverse Evolve from like set 1 and seeing in set 16 that these cards are kind of getting revamped. Like I think the card was Midnight Vampire, if correct me if I'm wrong in the comments, of course, but you were able to give all the force bats on your field drain, and you know, your force bats just can't attack as soon as they're played. So being able to engage this card and give those vampire tokens the +1/+1 attack, rush, and drain will allow us to at least heal. Alright, next up we have Minnow Shrewd Reaper. So it's a 1-cost 1/1. You can activate to engage this card and select enemy follower on the field and deal it 3 damage. You can activate only if there are at least 10 cards in your cemetery. Alright, so 1 play point to engage and deal 3 damage. You can only do that if you have the 10 cards, so Necrocharge 10. So I don't know how exactly we're going to be using this as a 1-cost card in Departed, but maybe in the demon deck this might be a lot cooler. Alrighty, next we have Beryl Nightmare Incarnate. So she's a 4-cost 5/5, and she has a strike ability to give your leader +5 defense, but when she comes into play Feign Fear, you can deal 3 damage to your leader. Right, so I believe the whole point of this in Worlds Beyond was that this was a cheap card that you're able to have like a huge stat line. Now, if this were like a 3-cost card that allowed you to play a 5/5 and you dealt like maybe like 4 damage to your leader, it's a little crazy, but I'm just concocting with crazy like card ideas. But being able to play for 4 and having a 5/5 might be a little bit harder for your opponent, but with cards like Predation where you can just get rid of 2 followers for 2 play points, you know, this isn't going to really equate. So we need to figure out a way to give this follower a rush so we can immediately swing into a follower. Alrighty, and lastly we have Shadow Crypt and Memorial. So it's a 1-cost amulet, so when it comes into play, Fanfare, you bury the top card of your deck, but you can also activate to engage this card and then bury this card, and then you summon a ghost token. Activate only if a follower in your field evolve this turn. Alright, so not knowing how often a ghost token is really going to matter here, but being able to threaten at least 1 point of damage that turn that you do get rid of this card is pretty good for the later turns. And alrighty, soldiers, we have our Cerberus U here, so if anyone is going to be looking forward to these cards, I hope you're able to acquire them and play them in set 16. And alrighty, soldiers, that is all of the reveals for Abysscraft set 16. Now, I do want to apologize if I said Hellbound for the Coco and Mimi's. I can't actually remember from when I did it, but they are Hellhounds, so make sure that that's correct. And you guys will get me in the comments if I said it wrong. But anyways, I'm still doing my investigation for the playsets of cases here. I actually did sit into the Discord and had like a mini conversation about people getting not the playsets that they need out of cases, which is absolutely ludicrous because that happened in set 9. So still doing my further investigation. I will definitely make a video on it, but first I need to get rid of the fact that I need to talk about BCS Philly experience, and then we got to talk about the BCS Philly results. But alright, soldiers, make sure you are safe in whatever you do tonight and safe whatever you do for the rest of the year. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.
Yeah, TRINN, just to get you away. What I got to do, what I got to do, just to get you away. What I got to do.